So, well, we were in the green room. Senator Cory Booker, you've had a full day, I'm sure. Welcome.
Yes, full stretch here. How are you?
Yeah, well, we doubly appreciate your joining. We've been longtime fans of Senator Cory Booker. I think you just got off a video call like 10 minutes ago.
I spent so much of my days on these video calls and these Zooms, but yes, I just finished one talking to local folks down in Kentucky who are struggling after the death of Breonna Taylor and doing a lot of really good work, actually.
Yeah, there's some huge news out of Louisville and Kentucky, right?
They've changed the law. They just got a Confederate statue out of the State House. There's just been this great expansion of empathy and action. So it's very beautiful to see a nation as a whole, all 50 states. There are activists of all diverse background who are challenging this sort of lack of empathy and love and understanding, and really showing, as King called us all, to be maladjusted to injustice. And they're really disturbing people who've grown too comfortable with injustice and getting people to act. It's amazing to witness. I really do feel like I'm witnessing it, and leaders just assuming leadership. So it's a beautiful moment in our country. It's still painful and people are raw, but I see a lot of possibility in this moment.
And that's what we look to you, among others, for always. So the other night I wrote about it. I blogged up your appearances on Conan and Colbert and Corden, the Late Late Show. And I was feeling, we've been all trying to do our work with educating ourselves around anti-racism and elevating voices of color. For a long time, we used to be known as a yoga publication. We put, at the time, civil unions on our cover. And at the time, we were a print magazine. Whole Foods said, that's not even an appropriate cover for a mainstream publication. They didn't have an ethical problem with it, but it was too controversial. And things have moved really quickly. And I think we forget that sometimes, because do you ever feel like things have not changed at all or not changed enough?
I definitely feel like things are not changed enough because, I've tried to change myself, and just because I've gotten comfortable, as I've said to my friends recently, often from, you unconsciously participate in injustices that your lack of awareness. So whether the food we eat and, did we know about people that are in meat packing worlds, or the massive 4 monocrops that suck in all of our tax dollars on these multinational corporations that are creating food overwhelmingly for animals that are being raised in ways that are divorced from our heritage, pasture-raised animals that are polluting soil. And so, as I've had the privilege as a senator to go around this nation and meet with people that are experiencing injustices at levels that churn your soul and stir your conscience. And so I do think that change is happening, and I want to always acknowledge that. But I just think that often we're not awake enough, or aware enough, maybe it's a better word, and it's a struggle to do that. And so one of the favorite sort of questions that I've gotten is from people who have been shaken by what they've been forced to see, because we know that George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery, we know these things go on. All of those, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, the man in Central Park, all these things are just being shown to us because they're being captured on a device that we didn't even have that long ago. And so I think that we're being forced to confront these things in ways that true artists of activism of generations and generations, whether it's civil rights movement, suffrage movement, even the disabilities rights movement, were creative people from the disabilities community that were doing extraordinary protests, from throwing themselves in buses to civil disobedience, that force us to confront injustice. Well, the question is we all have an obligation to be in struggle of rooting out injustices and not being worried about creating tension by bringing it forward. Because Martin Luther King said so eloquently that peace is not the absence of tension, it's the presence of justice. And we need to be in that creative collaboration for ourselves and our own families, as well as in community with people that are committed to living lives of awareness and of doing justice.
That's beautiful. The quote by Will Smith comes to mind where he says, "It's not worse, it's just getting filmed."
Yes, yes.
You just referred to that amazing quote. I had to repeat that in my mind a few times to get that. So we need to not be afraid of tension, and we need to work toward justice. But how do we, in this nation under the shadow of a president who revels in division, and we can't blame everything on him, it's still on us, how do we create peace that is active peace, not the sort of white moderates peace that Martin Luther King Jr. referred to?
Yeah, and I think that a lot of that is, it's a difficult journey not to center Donald Trump in your advocacy,
right? Because
he is not my end all and be all. I do not want to just go back to a time before Donald Trump because, I live in a low income neighborhood, and before Donald Trump, I had shootings in my neighborhood. Before Donald Trump, I had people in need of mental health care or addiction treatment that weren't getting it. Before Donald Trump, we had 3,000 jurisdictions in America that have where children have twice the blood lead levels of Flint, Michigan before Donald Trump. So this idea to center him would be making the same mistake as to center Bull Connor or all the demagogues that we've had before that draw energy, that's really what they're trying to do, negative or positive. They want to stay in the conversation. And so love has to be the energy, right? The elevation of frequency and energy of the world has to be the effort. And so I try not to give him that what he is seeking, and instead try to deal with the folks, good people of good intention and good heart, and try to let us all understand that we have the power. The power of the people is greater than the people in power, in this case, the person in power. And so this is one of those moments where this coming election for me is not a referendum on one guy in one office. It's not a referendum on the two men that are running. It's a referendum on us and who we are and what are we going to manifest in this nation that it does have this incredible privilege and potential. And so my activism, I try to remember that King ideal that what we have to repent for is not the vitriolic words and violent action of the bad people, but the silence and inaction of the good people. Yeah. I try to understand that we all need redemption because go ahead.
Senator Booker, the silence and inaction of the good people, a major thing we do is we get nihilistic. We give up hope. We say both parties are the same. I'm not going to vote. And look what we got in 2016 when we kind of were asleep at the wheel a little bit. Neither one's Senator Booker.
Yeah, one of my favorite. Well, thank you for saying that. One of my favorite heroes in America right now is a man named Brian Stevenson, who runs something called the Equal Justice Initiative. He's been a death penalty defender since I was in law school and invited him to speak. That's how I met him. Beautiful man. And if you have a chance in Montgomery, there's an amazing monument to people that were killed in lynching in America that I thought I knew a lot about that section of our history, those decades of thousands of Americans being slaughtered. He's created such powerful pieces, but he has this idea that I still remember it because a friend of mine showed me the video in the 2016 election where he just called it out. He said, what a privilege it is to say that it doesn't matter who wins this election. Because for the people that I represent, he said, it's a matter of life or death. People who are living at the margins, it's a matter of life or death. And so it's easy for me because I am, thanks to the people in New Jersey, I see the legislation, I see the laws, I see when Donald Trump rolls back with the stroke of a pen, methane laws and laws around mercury, laws around the things that are poisoning Americans and are directly connected to higher death rates and the kind of death that people suffer greatly before they die. I've seen around the margins what it means when just shifting the Department of Education from one of Obama's secretaries like King to Betsy DeVos, and Betsy DeVos deciding to eviscerate the Department of Civil Rights within the Department of Education, Division of Civil Rights, which means that LGBTQ kids no longer are getting the protections because we still live in a country where 30% of our LGBTQ kids are missing school because of fear. And anybody out there that's been bullied and intimidating, imagine getting that on an everyday basis and having no one to appeal to. We have a nation that's still where children, Black children, for the same infraction will have out of school suspensions at higher levels, while the Civil Rights Division in the Department of Education was dealing with that issue no longer. So I could go through the whole span of things that are life and death.
I think just today, the Trump administration is seeking to freeze their frankly racist immigration freeze.
Yeah, yes. And so human dignity, human life, it is on the line here. Many of us are privileged that our lives may not be affected that much by the outcome of an election, but our brothers and our sisters' lives will, and we are connected to them, and it will diminish the overall dignity of our country. So Brian Stevenson, who spoke so eloquently, the writer of this great book that I hope people read and better listen to, because his reading of it is so powerful, called Just Mercy, he really called that question. These elections matter, and not just the presidential. The Senate race is going on, and if the difference between Mitch McConnell being there, who's even stopped bills that are highly supported by Republicans in the House of Representatives from getting a vote in the Senate, like common sense background checks. Over 80% of NRA members think that you should not be able to get a gun in America without having a background check to see if you are suspected of terror. So,
and that's a beautiful notion that even NRA members there's actually a lot more unity than we're giving ourselves credit for.
I love that you say that, because I have found that. I've gone out to meet with Republican farmers in the Midwest who are getting crushed by the corporate monopolization of the food industries. The farmer, the producers of the vegetables that we eat, their share of the consumer dollars are going down about 50% as these big multinational corporations. And I found wide agreement with these Republican farmers. I found wide agreement with Republican local leaders who understand that in a time of a COVID pandemic, we need to get our government to invest in local government so that we don't have to lay off first responders. So we are far more in agreement. In fact, here's the best story I can tell you is Van Jones and Newt Gingrich had a television show called Crossfire.
Yeah.
They decided that, Brene Brown says it's hard to hate up close, so pull people in. And so here are these two guys that are forced to work together, to sit next to each other.
It could not be more opposite, right?
But they find out they like each other. It's hard to hate up close. And so they decided that they had lots of agreement, and they were going to do the last segment of their show called Ceasefire. Where do we agree? And they were all excited about it. They started doing it, and the producers came in and said, sorry, time out. You can't do this anymore because ratings are going down. Remember, so much of the news you watch, the headlines now, journalists all around America are now paid by the click-through on their article. The more sensational they can make the news, they're being incentivized, the better that they get paid. So our whole corporate information structure is being made in a way that's trying to heighten your hatred of someone else, your disagreements with someone else.
Well, and a lot of that, to be fair, I'm a trained journalist, so a lot of that is Facebook and the algorithms are actually ginned up. They want activity. It's not even evil. It's sort of colder than that. They want activity. So if they get extremism, they'll feed that. But boring, you and me agreeing, maybe that doesn't make, or better to say, you and a Republican farmer finding common ground may not be dramatic enough.
Yeah, and so that's the thing. And I love what you just did there, which is, let's not vilify each other. Let's understand that so many people are stuck in bad systems. That in journalists with lots of integrity has just been told that their lives and their paychecks are going to be dependent upon how many click-throughs they get. So the very models that used to support a lot of great journalism, it's harder and harder for them to make those models work in a world where, as you said, Facebook and Google and all these other algorithms are beginning to affect our well-being.
Yeah. So, to that point, I just blogged your appearances on Corden and others, and it really made my day. So thank you for doing all those videos. I was exhausted. Felt like giving up hope a little bit. Talk about privilege. And I watched those videos, and somehow, it's hard not to call you Cory, Senator Booker.
Please call me Cory.
Thank you. I invited that. Somehow it's impossible to be around you for too long and not feel this silly sense of hope, like not a rational sense of hope. Somehow, how do you keep that sense of hope when so many of my liberal friends are like, it doesn't even matter. I'm not going to vote. Who cares about Joe Biden? You know, we got our perfect candidate, remember, Obama? And then within months, not all, but a lot of my progressive friends here in Boulder, Colorado, quite liberal town, were like, Obama, he's old news, he's sold out, he's not perfect. How do we keep that sense of real grounded progressive hope where we're making change for those who don't have privilege?
Yeah, so I'm not the best person to ask the question simply because I have stared despair in the face. It has curled up with me at night. I have been.
That's why I want to ask you, because you deal with so much BS every day.
Yes.
How do you keep it?
Yeah, so I rely on people that have magic. They have this alchemy where they can turn despair into hope. I try to take instruction from these great leaders who blow me away. And so, look, as a guy of privilege, I grew up with two Black civil rights parents who went into corporate America, and they had to get a white couple to pose as them to buy the house I grew up in 1969. On the day of the closing, my father and the lawyer got attacked by the real estate agent and the real estate agent's dog. A lot of rigmarole. But next thing you know, my dad called us the 4 raisins in a tub of sweet vanilla ice cream. And I would walk around this beautiful home in suburban America, and my dad would get mad at me, a guy who grew up very poor. He would say he was too poor to be poor, so he was just P-O, couldn't afford the other 2 letters. Right. And he would look at his son and say, boy, don't walk around this house like you hit a triple. You were born on third base. And so by the time I'm 18 years old, I'm a high school All-American football player on the way to Stanford University. And so it really wasn't until I started making a decision with my life that I wanted to stay connected to those communities that are in struggle and do everything I could to be an ally or more than that, a accomplice in that struggle. So from the time I was a teenager, starting to work in low-income communities, and then for the last couple decades plus, I've moved into them. And it was here that I discovered, first of all, the lie that suburban communities don't have the exact same problems, from domestic violence to drug addiction to struggles with mental health. Something about often low-income communities is that, especially urban ones where people are so on top of each other, is often that fragility of life is out more in the open for people to see. But the powerful thing for me that was so mind-blowing, and I wrote about this in my book, was that I had these masters of spiritual teaching around me who seemed to find grace amidst this despair. Who, the tenant president of this projects, I lived in these high-rise projects for almost a decade. A woman named Miss Virginia Jones' son was murdered in the lobby of the building I lived. And I remember asking her why she still stayed in those buildings. I knew where she worked. She could have moved out a long time ago. And she looked at me and she just joked. She said, I still live here because I'm in charge of Homeland Security. And, what kind of alchemist are you that could turn the greatest, most wretched imaginable thing, the murder of your child? Right. She taught me that hope is the active conviction that despair will never have the last word. And so here's the funny thing. This time of Trump, quote unquote, the 4 years, have been my most hopeful years of my entire life as an American. Coming from this community where I've gotten the people that teach me suddenly led me to moments like this. It's now January or so of 2017. Trump just has his inauguration, and now they're bringing in a Muslim ban. And I race out to Dulles Airport with a court order to get the detained Muslim families from other countries access to a lawyer when they're detained. But I walk in and I get stopped in my tracks because the whole concourse is full of hundreds of Americans crowded in, and just to stand there and cheer Muslim families when they come out singing patriotic songs, not American citizens. I saw guys with yarmulkes on, tzitzis hanging out, dancing, living. I always say, before you tell me about your religion, show it to me and how you treat other people. Well, the Jewish faith is all about welcoming the stranger, because you were a stranger in a strange land. And then the funniest one of the times I just laughed out loud, I go back, the then senator of Indiana says to me, yeah, I did the same thing. I went to Indianapolis airport and we were crowded. We were hugging people as they were coming off the planes, except for Cory. There were no international flights. We were just hugging people from Detroit, and hugging.
That's good.
I mean, that's alchemy. That's turning wretchedness and despair. Still, president had all the power, but you were not giving up. And so for me, one of my favorite moments, again, this time of hope for me, I had to sit behind Donald Trump when he gave his inaugural address. And a part of me was like, I'm going to hear something. He's going to give some malice towards none, charity towards all. Right. Somehow the hallmarks of past inaugural addresses like that one that call out to the common decency and dignity and the need for but no, it was just like carnage and all of this. It was so funny because I watched George Bush and Clinton walk out together, and it is said to me that George Bush turns to Bill Clinton and said, "That was some strange shit." It was just like such a speech that I was all like, oh my God. So I go home that night in my little place in DC, curled up in my bed in a fetal position, throbbing headache, because I'm doing all the calculations on healthcare and knowing all the things that they're going to do. But the next morning, over 1 million women in America scream out to me. I hear, they're not talking to me, but this is what I hear. Cory Booker, this is not a time to curl up, to give up, or to shut up. Look at us in this Women's March. It is a time to stand up, to rise up, to speak up, because hope is the active conviction that despair will not have the last word. Donald Trump will not have the last word. Racism will not have the last word. Police brutality will not have the last word. We always have the choice, as we were taught by Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning. As a man in the Holocaust came out of it realizing that the greatest of all human freedoms, that you could do anything to a person except for that take away their freedom to choose their attitude, no matter how wretched or awful or the circumstances are. That is hope. That is the alchemy we need every day in America.
And the hope, I want to drum this in to everyone who's watching. We're going to share this with our 10 million fans on Facebook. Is hope isn't just an attitude. Hope has to be, as President Obama said in his high school address, I think a week ago, he said, hope is protesting, hope is lobbying, hope is voting, right? We have to ground this and tent peg this, as I like to say, and take action, right?
God, yes. I mean, the great thing about your community that you've created, and I'm so grateful for you creating a spiritual community and putting people in community with each other that is working to be value-based in our life, helping to empower us all, is that these ideals are not sentimentality. Love is not sentimentality.
Right.
Love is sacrifice. Love is hard.
Yeah.
Love is exposing your heart so it can get beat up and churned and broken time and time again. I always say, if America hasn't broken your heart, you don't love her enough.
Yeah.
And so the work of radical love means you are going to get beat up and scarred and hurt. It is the work of freedom riders. That's love. It is the work of Alice Paul, the first person ever to get arrested in front of the White House near Lafayette Park, where people she was a suffragette. She then went on a hunger strike before Gandhi. And she's getting force-fed. They were sticking tubes down her throat. She was being tortured in prison for her hunger strike. That's love. And so we are all the physical manifestations of the love of generations before us. That their love leapt, as Zora Neale Hurston says, their love leapt mountains, jumped over fences, knocked down walls for us. And so now the question is what is the quality of our mercy, as Shakespeare would say? How deep is our love, our commitment to those ideals? And the only way to know that is not by eloquent words, is by what we are doing in the name of love.
Well, speaking of words, it might be that same elderly lady you referred to in the projects. You were despairing. I think you were trying to help a young man who got shot, and she told you 2 words again and again.
Yeah, it was one of the times I was most angry at my country,
Yeah.
and where I was most ready to give up. I just really was being drawn into the horrors of the world, which are awful. And this was when I was on the scene of a young man that was shot and tried to stop him from bleeding with my own hands.
Right near your home, right?
Yeah, right near where I live, right near where I'm sitting right now. And I broke. I literally broke. I think that it was one of those moments where God had to rescue me, because I don't know what I would have done. And it was a long night, and I get up the next morning, early in the morning, thinking it's one of those times you just want to run. And most people on this call know that courage is so often just that small voice in your mind that just keeps telling you to get out of bed one morning, or put on your clothes, or keep trying, even though it all seems futile. And I get out there and get into the lobby of my building, cross through that area where Miss Jones's son was killed. And I come out of the courtyard, and here I am despairing and giving up over a teenager murdered in front of me who I didn't even know, and her son was murdered in front of her. She got to the scene as he was bleeding out, and there she is. At the time that I'm low, here's a woman that's seen the depths of it, and her back was towards me, and I'll never forget. I'm suffocating. I'm choking on the bitterness and the bile, as one poet says, the obesity of grief. And then she turns around and just opens her arms to me, and I run to her like I'm a small child. Really, I'm probably twice her size, and I break and I cry with an ugly cry, like everything was just coming out of me, pain, hurt, and grief. And these words that she said to me, I hold on to them like buoys at times, because she just holds me and rubs my back over and over again. And she says, stay faithful, stay faithful, stay faithful. And I don't think it had to do with religion. I just think it had to do with those ideals that we've been discussing, like that you just can't let go. You can't let yourself drown. This world needs you, and it needs you to take with you the pain and the hurt as fuel, to make you better in comforting others and helping others, and keeping and maintaining that faith, because there are people like Miss Jones and so many others that have been through more hell than we can imagine, and we're here because they didn't give up. And so I don't let myself get that hurt anymore, because I feel like I have the balm, spiritual balm, of great alchemists of love.
Thank you for that. And that's what you love. You refer to Brené Brown a lot. We blog about her all the time. That quality of vulnerability is bravery. Bravery isn't that kind of, as we're seeing modeled again in the White House, this sort of, it's not just an act where you walk out to the church, and kick people out of the way and hold up a book.
I mean, you and I as two men are sitting here, and we've got to admit that this toxic masculinity BS kind of what we celebrate in our culture sometimes, that doesn't even give many young boys the permission to cry or to be weak, which is strength. And we have a president now that wants to embody all of that it took me as a man to sort of wrestle with. So I so appreciate you calling that out. And this is why this idea of that you need a spiritual revolution before you get a physical revolution, a material revolution. And I'm just hoping that the bankruptcy of this kind of toxic masculinity that we see in him every day, that you don't apologize, that you never say sorry, that this is one of its last heydays, and that we react against it as a society.
Can you repeat to that point what you just said about Vice President Biden? Someone said, how can you support, this old white man. You said, well, I find it refreshing or charming, if you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah, the funny thing is I may be getting myself in trouble because, I've seen this now with Obama, Clinton, and now Biden, where you're trying to be a good surrogate. But I've been, in the last couple of days of interviews, I've been asked the question you just asked me on these other platforms that are not as spiritually woke as this platform necessarily, I should say. And I've been answering the question like what I really believe and sincere. It's like, look, I endorsed the guy months ago, and he's the right person to endorse for a lot of reasons. But there's something about watching him in this last month that has made me like him so much more. And it's really just that. It's that he has actually been vulnerable. He's been willing to say, I don't have all the answers. He's been willing to say, I messed up. I made a mistake. And that's been so endearing to me. And that I had a sweet conversation with him the last time we talked in person, right before COVID hit. I endorsed him. We were driving from Flint, Michigan to Detroit. And he just sort of waxed in such an eloquent way. I now wish we had like a video recording of how he talked, where he recognized that his role was to be a bridge to the next generation of American leadership, where he seemed to understand that if there's anything this last presidential election did that had me, I'm so blessed, but I hope your listeners could just imagine this moment where I'm some black guy standing on a stage that not many black people have stood on before. And I look to my one side and there's a gay guy, an openly gay man. I look at another side, there's an incredible woman. And I look down this sea of primary candidates, and I just started getting chills. Like, look at this country. You would never have seen a primary like this just 15 years ago. And so I think he sees himself this emerging, what this country did in 2018, just like you have a snapshot of the House of Representatives before the 2018 election and after. Native American women, openly gay, bisexual women. You have black, Korean. I mean, you have the whole rainbow of America, and so I think he understands what's coming right behind him. And he's a baby boomer. We've had baby boomers going back. That generation going back to Kennedy has dominated these. Nancy Pelosi, extraordinary woman from that generation. You have Chuck Schumer, extraordinary. So you've had this generation that has been on this national stage in most positions of power for a very long time. And I think what he sees now is he sees the future and knows that he's going to be one of the people that gets us there. So there's something about his fragility, his maybe that's not the right word. There's something about his vulnerability. Yeah. That has been really
openness to, and also taking some responsibility.
Yeah.
And you also pointed out that, he's going to assemble a diverse and skilled team, right?
I think he's not using these terms. I'm a little bit of a comic book guy. So I think he sees himself as like the Nick Fury, where he's going to assemble some Avengers in his cabinet. And I'm excited. I mean, he's already just saying it. Like, I think he caught like a lot of us Black Americans. Like, we were like, what did he just say? When he's like, yeah, I'm going to have a Black woman Supreme Court justice. And I was like, he didn't have to say that. Like, what he's just saying. So I think he's going to have, I'm excited to see the people out there. That's just wonderful. And I love this spirit of America right now, where I look at these protests. You have baby boomers who are like, God's not finished with me yet. I've got lots of laps around the track to go. You've got teenagers who are articulating these Generation Z kids standing side by side with boomers. It's just a wonderful moment where I just there's a couple nights I've just sat watching 24-hour cable just to study the crowds, because I've never seen it before. Multi-generational, multi-ethnic, multi-religious. It's sort of my dream of my country being made manifest on the streets. And I hope in the halls of power, more and more, it's going to be made manifest there.
I love that attitude, because so many people are saying, understandably, this nation, we are so effed right now with all this anger and these protests and these riots and the police brutality we're seeing on the front page of Reddit or wherever every day. And yet it's so hopeful too. You're seeing I watched a video with Reverend King from 60 years ago talking about protests that could have been recorded yesterday, and it made me hopeless for a minute. I said, things aren't changing. And then you see the streets and the people out there, and you feel that hope again. I want to ask a kind of personal question. Last week we had anti-racism educator Jane Elliott on, and I guess I want to ask, you've had experiences of, you wrote about in the blog that I blogged, I put your actual Stanford editorial.
Wow.
So people can read it. You talk about being angry, and no matter how much privilege you say you have, and I think you're being a little humble there, your parents were the first in that neighborhood. You've had a lot of obstacles, but you've had direct experiences, police with their guns drawn on you as a young man.
Yeah, look, I got my introduction to America in the 80s, where I was a very big young man. I was over 6 feet tall by the time I was in the 8th grade. And, my parents were worried. My elders in my family were worried about, like, this is a world that's going to see you as a threat, and that can be dangerous.
And you were a football player. You were a big guy.
Yeah, just as I was coming into my physical strength, I was beginning to be told about how susceptible I was to sudden death, to beatings, and to misunderstandings. And as people were trying to prepare me for that world, I was starting to experience, in a mall, being followed or surveilled, or humiliating childhood experiences with people who are subject to implicit racial bias or the like. And then by the time I started driving, that's when things really became apparent, being behind the wheel in a way that my friends were not getting the same treatment, and being scared. By that time, I was in a long period of my life where I was just scared of police, and then started having really, at Stanford and places like Palo Alto, just really scary experiences. And it all came.
You were a football star, a Rhodes Scholar, all these things, and all that can be taken away in 1 second, right?
Yeah, I think that was the emotionalness of this last few weeks with so many of my friends. As we all know, that it could have been us jogging in a neighborhood. It could have been us sleeping in our home. It could have been us that paid for money with a counterfeit bill. So I think that or bird watching in Central Park. Right. So I think that this knowledge, the knowledge we've all had. I mean, Tim Scott, who's a beautiful man on the other side of the aisle than me, black guy. One of the most eloquent speeches I've heard in the Senate was him on the Senate floor talking about his constant run-ins with the Capitol Police. So it's something that never goes away. This understanding that you live in a world that will still treat you by the color of your skin, and that actually could cost you your lives. And I think that the night I wrote that column, "Why Have I Lost Control?" the night of the Rodney King verdict, I really had lost control. I was just so angry and so hurt, and the trauma, the sort of collective trauma of all those small experiences suddenly welled up for what it was. And I wrote this column where I laid it plain about being a president of my class at Stanford, Rhodes Scholar, football player, all these things, and still feeling like, that I was viewed as the N-word by people, right, the power to kill me. And I still remember marching in the streets. And then what's been hurtful now, 20, almost 30 years later, is that that I have young people in my life, nephews and mentees, that I have the same elder concerns that my elders had with me. And how can I repeating this awful American tradition that doesn't just go back 10 years, 30 years? Read the Kerner Commission report, read what was going on in the 1940s, 50s, when blacks were coming back from the World War II and what was happening to them by police. Go back to World War I and the bombing of Black Wall Street, and the massacres and the lynching, and how police have been used, going all the way back to slave catchers.
You're not just talking. You and Kamala Harris, Senator Harris, just advanced anti-lynching bill, and it was defeated by, like, you can explain it to us, but 1 vote or something. That's how much it matters.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, it's actually really exciting American history. I mean, so there was a civil war and this very narrow period where blacks got the right to vote. We're voting upwards of 80%, first time ever voting. And now you suddenly get blacks elected to offices all over our land. In the South, you had black Congress people, black senators, very narrow area. And then remember, Lincoln's shot, Johnson rises. Johnson is a firm anti-Reconstruction. The Congress at the time was fighting to stop Johnson. They were pro-Republican controlled, pro-Reconstruction. And really, Reconstruction fell around a depression in the late 1870s. And basically, they just gave up on the South. And that's when the rise of the KKK, the rise of lynchings and beatings, and all of these black judges, black lawyers were literally, some of them being pulled from their offices, made examples of in the streets, thousands of people being killed. And suddenly you went from having blacks in Congress to all of them gone. The last one, a guy named Congressman White, gave this powerful speech about the phoenix will rise again. He predicted that one day, it would be about 70 plus years until you'd see another congressperson come from the South who was black. But he predicted the return of blacks to the Senate and to the House. I'm only the fourth popularly elected African American to the Senate. And that means people, when in the modern era, it was me, then Barack before me, then Mosley Braun, and then before that Edmund Burke. But the powerful thing about White in his last speech is one of his last major pieces of legislation was anti-lynching, at a time that he saw the horrors and the mass murders and the terrorism in the South. And then over 200 times, I think that speech was 1901 to 1920 to 2020, 200 plus times, people have tried to make lynching a law, a federal law to stop lynching. And now it got passed in the House of Representatives with only 4 Republican members voting against it. So the majority of the House of Representatives. In the Senate, 99 senators want to pass it on something called unanimous consent, but 1 senator is blocking it. And it was painful on the day of Ahmaud Arbery's memorial. That senator decided to come to the floor and try to push his changing to this bill that forced Kamala and I to go down to the floor and have a very emotional confrontation with him that led to really some beautiful moments. One was one of my colleagues who came down to the floor and said, "I'm so sorry, I was watching on TV. You too shouldn't have to carry this burden." Talk about allyship there. That was powerful. And then a Republican senator who witnessed the whole thing, she stands up and she just said, "I'm so happy I was on the floor to hear this because I felt it." And she complimented Kamala and I on how we spoke. So look, this law will pass. Yeah. It's a shame that it's being stopped right now, but all of this tumult, it's like the soil of our souls is being tilled up in a difficult way, but seeds are being planted now. That I think a harvest is coming, and I pray a harvest it will indeed come, harvest of justice and empathy and love.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I've taken much more of it than I think I should have. Final question. I wore a special shirt for you. It's a company I know that is vegan. Why on earth, Senator Cory Booker, are you vegan? Can you tell? Most of our readers are not vegan. We definitely share a lot of vegan recipes, but our friends just made game changers. Like, what's your thoughts on that whole thing?
Yeah, well, first of all, my goal is not to have everybody in the world be vegan. I think the most intimate things are the things you decide to put inside your body. And I once said to a very devout vegan friend of mine, what would you prefer right now, to have 10% more vegans or have 50% of Americans eat a lot less factory farm meat? And that would change the environment so much quicker. So
reduce suffering, so much suffering. I always say factory farms should be the common enemy of everyone who eats meat and vegans.
Oh, I put in the first ever bill in the history of America going at these factory farms, ending these horrible CAFOs and more. So I'm with you. I just think that consciousness, know what's going on, and the way we produce food in this country is hurting farmers, producers. It's why that I go to my bodega up here and my kids can get a Twinkie product cheaper than an apple. Think about that for a second. So our food systems are savagely broken. I'm going to be doing a full court press, especially after, God willing, my reelection in November. I'm going to do a full court press on broken food systems. But what you asked me a personal question, I want to give you a personal answer. I am a competitive athlete, really in tune with my body. I used to be chiseled and had lush, wonderful afro back in those days. This was all about competitiveness. And so in 1992, I became a vegetarian. My body just took off. Better sleep. I just felt so much better. And I started reading books that you probably know, Diet for a New America, and so many other great books. And I said that I not only need to be a vegetarian, I should be vegan eventually. And but the more I read, I just started saying, for my personal values, you talk about suffering, environmental issues. I mean, the more I've learned and read, and the final days. So I was sort of a vegan flirt for decades, but in 2014, I just knew too much. I still remember eating, you know, how like you go to these big events, they have that big tray of eggs, you know, and I now know everything that went into, you know, these eggs. And I just finally said, why am I doing this? It's not in accord with, so I just said, I'm going to do this. I did it online. I just said, this is going to be an experiment. And I just never went back. So now it's been 6-7 years. And so I hope we will always be in struggle with our own choices. And we're voting in November, I hope everybody, but you vote every day with your dollars.
Yeah.
And we are, I do it. I don't know where this shirt was made. I don't know if this is fast fashion. Is there suffering inherent in that? And if I'm privileged enough, I should ask those questions. I should wrestle with that. You know, my significant other and I were talking about buying a mattress. And, you know, I have the privilege and the resources to go deeper into how is it made? How is it sourced? All of these things. And so if you have the ability to do that, ask those questions and make decisions that are in line with the world. Because I do believe at the end, and I know we're wrapping up, but one of my favorite stories about leadership ever was a story, I don't know if it's apocryphal or not, about Gandhi, who had a mother and a child come to see him waiting in a long line. The mother is like, Gandhi, you talk about dietary discipline. Please tell my son to stop eating sugar. And Gandhi looked at her compassionately, looked at him compassionately, then looked back at her and said, no. and she goes, why? He goes, and she started protesting. He goes, well, please come back in 2 months and ask me the same question. So she leaves, she waits in the long line. 2 months later, she gets to see him. Would you please tell my son to stop eating sugar? Gandhi looks at her compassionately, looks at him with compassion, stands up, walks over to the boy, puts his hand on the boy's shoulder and says, my son, you must stop eating sugar. And the boy is affected. The mother's happy. And they walk out, but she stops on the way out. She goes, forgive me for being disrespectful. Why wouldn't you just tell my son to stop eating sugar 2 months ago? And Gandhi looks at her sort of perplexed by the question. And he goes, because 2 months ago, I was eating sugar.
Wow.
And so I am like you are. We're all imperfect, and we're all people in struggle. But I am like everyone who's listening to this. We are all leaders. There's a researcher at Stanford University who has researched just one kind deed in a day can ripple out 3 degrees of separation and change the behavior of others. We all have all of this power. And the most important thing I can do is just try to live my values as best as possible, knowing that I'm going to come up short every day. And the more I do that, the more I'll resonate in my reach and influence.
I love that. And living our values when it's super yummy. You got tacos or if you're ever in Boulder, we have the best vegan gelato I've ever had, including in Italy, where they're actually
don't just throw things out like that. I'm a person who will take you up on it. I love it, and I love, unfortunately, too much. I love vegan gelato.
Well, you're lucky you don't live here then. And it's all local ingredients. It's amazing. And then you can also visit our Congressman Joe Neguse, who's a friend of ours.
He's Colorado. I put this on. Don't make me name them because I'll get upset. But I have my 5 favorite states in America, and Colorado is my favorite states. It's a really special place.
You say that to all the states.
I do not. I have a beef to pick. Pun intended, by the way. That when I was playing for Stanford, we're playing the Buffs, and it's halftime. We go in, we come out. I'm stretching on the sidelines, and then I see my other players starting to jump up, move, and and there's a buffalo. I'm a guy from Jersey, for crying out loud. There is a
Yeah.
charging etny. I am literally in this site, and I love animals, but this time I was not happy about. So I still have a little. I know forgiveness is important. This is a hard one. I haven't let go of that completely yet. I tell Michael Bennett all the time about my anger, but I have to let it go.
Well, his name is Ralphie, or the grandson of the Ralphie who nearly ran you over is still doing it. Yeah. And that's a weird scene to see as a vegan. Powerful bison let out of a cage for 20 seconds.
Yeah.
Anyway, Senator Cory Booker, thank you so much. It's an honor. It's more importantly, it's a pleasure, and we need it, all of us. And we will share this as hard as we can. Everyone, when our video with Senator Booker is up, please share it. Check out some of the vegan recipes we just put in the sidebar. Check out Cory's videos that I put up. They're powerful and affecting and hopeful. And thank you for Senator Booker for doing this. You remind me as a liberal that dissent is democratic, and getting engaged and not giving up is the path forward.
Well, I pray that we have a chance to meet again, to do this again. And talk about more. And really, after November, I would love to go deeper with you on all the savage brokenness of our food systems. Maybe we can do this again next end of the year, next year, and talk about that, because I know these issues are in your heart as well as in your head. It'd be great to have a conversation.
It'd be my honor. Thank you so much.
Thanks for reaching out to me over Instagram. I was psyched. Yeah.
I know. I mean, you get them where they are.
Yes.
All right. Senator Booker, thank you. And Molly, you can, we could all bow. Senator Booker, everyone share your appreciation. Yeah, we're making our own oat milk in the quarantine. It's super easy and cheap. And you can make granola after that using the leftovers. People don't want to let you go.
I'm looking at these comments. I didn't see all this stuff. Somebody is a big Buff fan on here, and it's very painful for me to see that.
I know, yeah. Well, but we have a strong Colorado readership. What can I say?
I see that. Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Thank you, Molly. You can allow there we go. So thank you. How was that for everyone? We're not over. If people will stay for 2 minutes, we are not done. I want to do something we didn't do with Jane Elliott, which is have a container, which is have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So the beginning and the middle were Senator Cory Booker. What a delight. What a delight. What an inspiring, hopeful guy. For all of us who want to give up, which is, I think, all of us sometimes, he just did run for president. He will run again, I hope. I'm sure, I hope. But the container here that I want to communicate is, last week we had Jane Elliott. Who was here for Jane Elliott? Anyone? Let's put her link in one more time for those who weren't. While you're ginned up, are people inspired? I feel like I'm seeing a lot of exclamation marks. I think you're inspired. Last week we had Jane Elliott. That's a lot of work for a small staff. We are independent media. This week we had Senator Cory Booker. Who should we invite next week? There are amazing people out there, amazing people. And I have some names, and yes, the next name is a woman that I'd like to invite. We can only do it if y'all subscribe. This isn't a telethon or an NPR campaign. But when you subscribe, if you can't afford to subscribe, you can read, you can share. There's plenty of things you can do for free. But if you do subscribe, it's $3 a month. That's the price of a pretty bad cup of coffee these days. Yeah, Brene Brown, great possibility. Lama Rod Owens, love him. So please subscribe. Is anyone willing to put your name out? And I'll give you a shout out. Can anyone say, yes, I will subscribe right now? The link is elephantjournal.com/subscribe. Can we put that in the sidebar? Marianne Williamson, we've already interviewed twice, actually. Roshi Joan Halifax, we can put those links with Marianne Williamson. Joan Halifax, we've interviewed twice. Yeah, $13 a year. We used to be $1 a month. Thank you, Nicole. Is anyone willing? Me right now. So P exclamation mark, thank you. elephantjournal.com/subscribe. I'm seeing a ton of people, thank you so much, who say you subscribe now. Is anyone willing to sign up now? That will make it possible. And someone very sweetly said, you're willing to continue with these gatherings even if we can't afford to invite folks. We will continue to offer these gatherings for free. If you want to join Elephant Academy, that's another way. We show how to grow your Instagram. We show how to write and share your genuine voice. That's right here. And there's a, oh, it looks like we just have the share your voice up, but go to Elephant Academy. Has anyone else, Elizabeth says she'll subscribe. Can people call out who's subscribing right now? I might have missed it. Ryan Van Duzer has been a subscriber since 1944. We are 17 years old now. And Ryan has also written and done videos on Elephant a lot. Laura did Elephant Academy. Is anyone willing to subscribe or do Elephant Academy? Did I miss? Yeah, you can do gift subscriptions. You can email support@elephantjournal.com for those who can't afford. That's Mina, that's very powerful. I will subscribe. Lori, thank you. Shanna, thank you. Chris Howells, thank you. $3 a month. And honestly, if we even get like 10, it makes our entire day. If we get 40, that makes our week. That's how small we are. We're 30 staff. We're working our butt off. And man, I'm so inspired. A woman, I am so inspired and so grateful. Suzanne, thank you. Suzanne Jewell or Buchanan, or it's going too fast. Sandy Buchanan, thank you. Suzanne Jewell, thank you. Laura will gift 3 subscriptions. If you can't figure out how to do it, you can email support@elephantjournal.com. Thank you everyone who has done it. And we're going to try to get a big guest for next week. Not big in terms of fame. Fame is not, our last 2 guests have been famous, but big in terms of our ability to change our lives. So this shouldn't just be entertainment, right? We need to educate ourselves in anti-racism for those of us who are not of color. For those of us who are of color, we can explore our relationship to feminism or LGBTQ rights, queer rights, or, you know, there's always another mountain to climb to open our heart wider. And I was hoping we'd put in some Brene Brown links on the sidebar there. Maybe we can do that right now. And every time you open up an article, hopefully it's good for you. It's certainly good for Elephant, for our editors, for our writers. We pay our top writers. So please join Elephant Academy or subscribe. That's all I got. Lindsay and others are super busy putting in links. If you see a Joan Halifax link, if you see a vegan transition link, please open those up. And I'll leave with a little view of my dog. He's been right here the whole time. He's been very sick. He's had a rough week. He got poisoned and then he got stung on his eyeball and almost went blind for a few days. So give Redford some love. Give yourself some love. Keep protesting respectfully, peacefully if you can. Although, as Martin Luther King Jr., Reverend, said, rioting is the language of the unheard. So thank you for everyone for joining. Thank you to everyone. There's some Brene Brown links. Please take that in. Cory, Senator Booker, refers to Brene Brown in almost every interview I've seen him do. She is a powerful force. Even more powerful, in my view, is Pema Chodron, because it's grounded in actual meditation practice, not concept. Brene is also incredibly grounded in her experience. It's not a comparison. That's not the point. But please, let's put in a Pema Chodron. If you like Brene Brown, you'll love Pema Chodron. And with that, let's all take a great posture and have 1 second of meditation. Find your breath, eyes open, ideally. And let's say, may I be of benefit to all sentient beings. And if you need further inspiration on that note, there's Pema with Tonglen, a meditation practice for difficult times. Thank you everyone so much. Big love to everyone who joined, particularly if you've been here since the beginning, and particularly if you were here, if this was your first one. So please open up those Pema Chodron articles and read them at your leisure. And may you all enjoy vegan gelato and change out of your sweaty shirts.